Hi, and welcome to the 700 Club. Scribbles on a napkin. That was included in the records seized in the raid of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Democrats are demanding intelligence officials brief lawmakers on the national security implications of the 11 sets of classified documents recovered.
The former president could face charges of violating the Espionage Act and obstruction of justice, both of which carry prison sentences. Trump's supporters are claiming the investigation is an abuse of power by the FBI. Dale Hurd has more.
We've learned the FBI search warrant of Donald Trump's Florida home authorized the confiscation of every record he ever saw, read, or created during his 4 years as commander-in-chief, all the way down to scribbles on a napkin. Democrats are asking for a damage assessment from the intelligence community on the 11 sets of classified documents recovered in the raid, including one marked SCI, a classification for some of the most sensitive national security information that is normally viewed in a highly secured location. A lawyer for Trump signed a statement in June after a visit from the FBI saying all classified documents at Mar-a-Lago had been turned over to federal investigators.
Some of those documents were marked top secret, sensitive compartmented information. That is among the highest designation in terms of the extremely grave damage to national security that could be done if it were disclosed.
The warrant also shows that agents were looking for evidence of 3 potential crimes, including obstruction of justice and violations of the Espionage Act. Violating the Espionage Act carries a sentence of 10 years in prison. Obstruction of justice, as much as 20 years behind bars. The former president has not been charged, and he claims the files were declassified. Some Republicans are calling the investigation an abuse of power.
The FBI raid of President Trump is a complete abuse and overreach of its authority. This is the same agency leadership that protected Hillary Clinton, James Comey, and continues to protect Hunter Biden.
The Department of Justice also allegedly took materials that contained privileged attorney-client communications. GOP members are calling on the Justice Department to release more information on reasons for the search.
I think releasing the affidavit would help. At least that would confirm that there was justification for this raid.
Lawmakers from both parties are calling for calm after threats against law enforcement and after some armed Trump supporters protested outside a Phoenix FBI office. Andrew?
Dale, thanks for being with us. You know, many of the president's supporters who are critical of the FBI claim there's a double standard here. What's their basis for that?
Well, you'll recall Hillary Clinton's private email server she was running as Secretary of State. It had thousands of classified emails on it, some of them marked top secret. When her attorney found out about it, she had the server wiped. No punishment. Bill Clinton's national security advisor, Sandy Berger, was caught literally stuffing documents in his pants, trying to get them out of the National Archives. He got off with a relatively minor fine. And, of course, the Hunter Biden laptop and new evidence that Joe Biden has been lying about his knowledge of Hunter's business dealings.
All right, Dale, thank you so much for that report. We know CBN News will keep us up to date on this story as it unfolds. In other news, American tourists were among the injured in an attack on a Jerusalem bus this weekend. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from the CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Andrew, at least 5 Americans are among the wounded after an Arab-Israeli man opened fire near Jerusalem's Old City. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, terror groups are claiming a victory.
Terror groups welcomed the attack and called it an heroic operation.
Today, this operation confirms that the Palestinian people continue on the path of resistance, and all the tools of struggle and resistance against this occupation are to protect our people, our land, and our holy sites.
The attack occurred just outside Jerusalem's Old City walls, near a place called David's Tomb, where people pray. The terrorist opened fire on a crowded bus and those nearby, wounding 8, including a pregnant woman.
6 wounded arrived at the trauma unit at Shard Zedek Medical Center. 2 wounded in serious condition, a pregnant woman in her 30s with a very complex abdominal injury, and a man in his 60s with an injury in the neck and head, also a gunshot wound.
All the wounded are recovering, including the woman and her baby, which had to be delivered by C-section. While Hamas praised the attack, the suspect, Amir Sidawi, a Jerusalem resident, is not a member of a terrorist organization. He does have a criminal background and turned himself into police hours after the shooting. The U.S. condemned the attack, and U.S. Ambassador to Israel Tom Nides tweeted, "Deeply saddened to confirm that Americans were injured in this attack. I've spoken with the families and will keep them in my prayers, continuing to monitor the situation." Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid said police will reinforce Jerusalem.
There is one conclusion from this event, as from previous events. Whoever harms the citizens of Israel will have nowhere to run. We will hunt them down and get them everywhere, and will deal with them with the full severity of the law.
He emphasized that Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, is what he called safe, open, strong, and welcoming to tourists and residents. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Egypt's Christians are mourning the death of at least 41 believers killed in a church fire Sunday morning. Thousands attended a memorial service and pre-burial prayer Sunday evening. Earlier in the day, a fire swept through a packed Coptic Orthodox church in Cairo. Thick black smoke rapidly filled the sanctuary, and people were seen jumping out of windows. At least 15 children are among the dead. Investigators don't know the cause of the fire, but believe it started with an electrical short circuit. Turning now to Taiwan, where a visit by members of the U.S. Congress is spurring China to start another round of military exercises. The delegation is led by Democrat Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. The 5 Congress members visited Taiwan's legislature earlier today. The visit comes just 12 days after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip sparked 2 weeks of war games by China. China's leaders saying the U.S. visits are a provocation. Now to the war on Ukraine, where atrocities by Russian troops are fueling the refugee crisis that's forced millions to flee the country. But victims are finding physical and spiritual comfort at a center run by CBN's Orphans Promise in neighboring Poland. Lucille Toulousan reports from Warsaw.
Ukrainian mother Oksana Horbunova showed CBN News this video of utter destruction she shot while driving to Irpin and Bucha, cities bombed by Russia. On these trips, she brings food and much-needed supplies to residents trapped in the war zone, then transports women, children, and the elderly back to Poland. Oksana shared accounts of the barbaric acts Russian soldiers have inflicted on civilians.
I saw moms that cannot live because her 3 daughters being raped in front of her, and 2 of them have died. And I saw kids who saw how their grandmas and moms being raped on their eyes, and they cannot talk because of the stress. 2 of my friends, Christians, were helping to evacuate people in a village not far from Kiev, and they've been murdered and killed to the death. And his wife still don't have braveness to look at the pictures. His feet were shot, his arms were broken, the knives holes in the belly, and 4 shots through the head. War, it's when army is go against the army. It's hard to call this war Israel war, because it's mostly like evil against the humanity.
Oksana says there is a tremendous need to help war victims overcome trauma. And this is why she, church partners, and other humanitarian organizations are happy that CBN's Orphans Promise is now in Poland. Today is very historical because the first Orphans Promise Center behind me is being opened. And this is very timely because there are millions of Ukrainian refugees, especially mothers and children, and they are here and they will be able to get all the support that they need through Orphans Promise.
I think God is using all of these circumstances to bring people to Him. He's using us during this time to bring all of these people who are lost, who lost everything, but they're going to find the only thing that they need in life here as the relationship with Jesus.
Orphans Promise works with a Hand of Help organization at this training center. There is a divine connection in that Hand of Help director Misha Babyak and his wife worked with Orphans Promise in Berdyansk, Ukraine, where Terry Musen adopted 3 sisters. 5 years ago, Misha and his family moved to Poland at the Lord's direction, not knowing why.
God impressed in my heart that there will be a united work with CBN and Orphans Promise, but we did not know what it was. But during those 5 years, we established good relations with the local churches here. When the war broke out, we began helping refugees. Through this partnership, God will touch the hearts of the Ukrainian people. In this center, they will learn how to trust God. Now we understand why God has called us here.
Orphans Promise organized kids camps for Ukrainian kids and teenagers. They played games, did crafts, and learned about Jesus through Superbook. As one mother put it, "What did you do with my kids? They were finally happy again this week. I heard them laughing again." Lucille Telusan, CBN News, Warsaw.
God is able to use all things for your good and His glory. Andrew.
A great perspective, Ephraim. You know, as the war in Ukraine becomes less prominent in America in the news cycle, a lot of us tend to forget what's going on and the trauma associated with families that are displaced. You've had families whose husbands went off to war. They haven't seen them. Now families are living in new countries, and the emotional trauma is significant. And Terry Mewson started Orphans Promise years ago. And Terry, Orphans Promise was ready and staged, perhaps not ever anticipating something like this, but you're making an enormous difference in people's lives.
We had no idea. Even Misha and Luda, the couple that you saw that are in Warsaw now, moved there from a work of ours they were doing in Vinica, not knowing why they were called to Poland. And here they are, opening a center. You know, one of the things that Orphans Promise has been able to do is not just come and stay for a season, but hunker down and stay. And it makes such a difference in the lives of people. So in that center, hopefully we'll be able to do some trauma, investing in some trauma training for people, but also some trauma healing for those who've come through. And a lot of those people will go back, but many will not. They will stay where they are. So there are huge needs there today and down the road.
Yeah, building a new life. And it's not just about people being physically safe. Now it's about healing emotional wounds and sharing the gospel of Jesus. So if you'd like to get on board with what CBN is doing through Orphans Promise, you can just call 800-700-7000 and say, I want to join the 700 Club, and a portion of your gift is going to go to the efforts of Orphans Promise.